Good morning, Isley. How are you guys? So good to see you. So this morning I have the pleasure to be introducing our new series. We are going to be going through the book of Proverbs for the next 6 weeks, looking at the people of Proverbs, looking at the characters in the book of Proverbs and some of the valuable lessons that we get from there. We're going to be looking at the wise, the noble, the simple, the sluggard, and the fool. And this morning I'm going to be looking at the way of wisdom, which then introduces this series to us. And it's an amazing book. I love Proverbs. And really the takeoff line or tagline there is the art of living with wisdom. And I would begin by asking us, how many of us this morning would want to have more wisdom? It's almost everyone. Those that had their hands down, they are the wisest. They don't need wisdom. But I need wisdom because we live in a challenging world where we are constantly having to make tough decisions, make tough choices. And wisdom helps us, and we need wisdom. So we're going to look at the way of wisdom, and then we're going to find out how we're going to journey in this next 6 weeks. But I think it's prudent for me just to give an overview of the book of Proverbs so that at least I can ground it. That as we continue looking at these characters, you can connect with what Solomon was talking about. So the book of Proverbs is a collection of practical life wisdom that is given mostly in short, memorable statements. They are short, punchy, but they are loaded. And just recently this week, I think on Star FM, they've been going through African proverbs from different nations. You and I would know quite a number of proverbs, African proverbs, right? The famous one that I like is, it takes an entire village to raise a child. The other one that I know is the Chinese one. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. Or the other one that you might remember, which my wife told me was on Star FM, is from Somalia. You cannot go on a journey with someone else's donkey. Which basically means that, you know what, you cannot take someone else's resource to use it for your own things, you know. So these are short, punchy, but they are loaded with stuff. And they are there in such a way that we can remember them. So that's what we're going to be looking at. And Proverbs is unique in such a way that it's unique in its structure. It's just a collection of statements, but there's no context in terms of organization or a topical sort of organization around it, right? It's unique in its theology. You would know that Proverbs, it does not quote any Hebrew wisdom literature or the Torah. It's just concerned. It doesn't talk a lot about God's idea on salvation. And it is unique in its connection as well, even with secular wisdom. And we are going to be going through this, and we're going to be looking at it. And some of the wisdom that we have actually came from the ancient Near East, like Egypt and Babylon. You remember the Magi's who came from the Far East visiting Jesus. They were from Babylonia. And that's what we're going to be looking at. And Proverbs really teaches through short points and principles. The Proverbs should not be regarded as laws, so as to speak, or even as universal promises. Proverbs is a book of principles and not promises. Just like Dan Phillips, who wrote in a commentary God's wisdom in Proverbs, he says, Proverbs are wonderfully successful at being what they are. They are not failed prophecies or systematic theologies. Proverbs by design lay out pointed observations meant to be memorized and pondered, not always intended to be applied across the board to every situation without qualification. So that's what we're going to be looking at as we go through these next 6 weeks. And I'm excited about Proverbs because I think all of us need to grow in wisdom. And we're going to discover what it takes to grow in wisdom. What are the ways of wisdom? What are some of the characters we have? Who wrote the book of Proverbs? It is Solomon, yes. I mean, Proverbs 1, chapter verse 1 actually says, the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. But where we really discover who wrote Proverbs is 1 Kings chapter 3 from verse 11 to 12. So Solomon had succeeded his father David, and now he was the king of Israel. And then Solomon went to Gibeon, where he made sacrifices to God. And God visited him in the early hours of the morning in a dream, in the vision of the night. And God asked him, what would you want, Solomon? Ask of anything and I'll give it to him. And Solomon asked for wisdom. And we hear from 1 Kings 3, verse 11 says, and God said to him when he had asked for wisdom, because you have asked this and have not asked for yourself long life or riches or the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern what is right. Behold, I now do according to your word. Behold, I give you a wise and discerning mind, so that none like you has ever been before you, and none like you shall arise after you. So we know Scripture actually confirms that Solomon was the writer. He is the author of Proverbs. And even as you flip the next chapter in 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 32 and 34, we actually then get a little bit more, because it says that he spoke 3,000 Proverbs and he wrote 1,005 songs. So Nyasha, I think you need someone like like Solomon on your worship team. They just write. He had over 1,000 songs that he wrote. He spoke about cedars, of trees, of hyssops that grow on the wall. He spoke also about beasts and of birds and of reptiles and fish. And people of all nations came to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and from all the kings of the earth who heard of his wisdom. So there you go, the book of Solomon, the book of Proverbs. Although much of the credit is given to Solomon, there are also certain authors that we know wrote Proverbs. For example, if you read Proverbs 25, verse 1, it says, the wise men of Hezekiah, the king Hezekiah, they copied and wrote Proverbs of Solomon. If you read again in Proverbs 30, verse 1, it says, the words of Agu, the son of Jekah. If you read again Proverbs 31, verse 1, the famous chapter, the noble woman, it says that the words of Lemuel. And a lot of theologians actually say that Lemuel was Solomon's other name. So besides Solomon, we also have other authors that are there as well, like Jekah, the son of Jekah, Agu, and Lemuel. And what is the purpose of the book? We get the purpose of the book right in chapter 1 of Proverbs from verse 1 to verse 6. It says, number 1, to know wisdom and instruction, to understand words of insight, to receive instruction in wise dealing, in righteousness, justice, and equity, to give prudence to the simple, knowledge and discretion to the youth. Let the wise hear and increase in learning. And the one who understands obtain guidance, to understand a proverb or an enigma, a saying, and the words of the wise. So we know right there in chapter 1, the purpose of this book is for us to know wisdom and instruction, for us to grow in wisdom and in knowledge. I mean, we live in the info age. There's just so much information at our disposal. At a click of a button, you can get any information that you want. Now, more so with AI, there's a lot that you can do. I could have chosen to ask AI to write my preach this morning, but I did not do that because I felt I needed the correct wisdom, right? But there's just so much wisdom. There's so many people who know so much. But it's not everyone who knows everything that use that knowledge or that information for their success in their daily walk. And Proverbs is going to help us to do that, just that. And what we want to know right from the onset is that knowledge is a collection of facts, and wisdom is the right application of what we know or the knowledge that we have acquired for daily use. That is wisdom. That's what Solomon was talking to as he spoke to his son. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Proverbs, the school of wisdom. That's what we're going to be doing for the next 6 weeks. We also know that even for kings, for those that judge, Solomon helps us to judge well, to have justice, and to have equity, just like he says in verse 3. And verse 4, I like to say, it gives prudence to the simple. That is the reason. To the simple, to the young man, knowledge and discretion. If you read Proverbs 14, verse 15, I'll just turn to there. You don't need to turn there. Here's what it says. It says, verse 15, the simple believes everything, but the prudent gives thought to his steps. So Proverbs is there to help the simple to gain knowledge, to gain wisdom. Because as a young man, I used to make I still make mistakes. If you need to ask Natsi, she's not here. But I still make foolish mistakes. So imagine a young man who is inexperienced. The simple, they also need wisdom. Not only the simple, but even the wise men and women as well. They also need wisdom. Verse 5, wise men will hear and increase in understanding or counsel. The beauty of Proverbs is such that it is not just for the simple. It is not just for women. It is not just for men. It is not just for the great man, but it is for everyone. The simple and the wise. All of us, we need wisdom. This is what Alan P. Ross says in the Expositor's Bible commentary. He says, Proverbs is not simply for the naive and the gullible. Everyone can grow by its teaching. Discerning people can obtain guidance from the book so that they might continue the right way. And most importantly, or what I think is the theme of the book, is verse 7, which actually says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of all knowledge. But fools despise wisdom and instructions. If you read Psalm 14, verse 1, it actually says that the fool says there is no God. But we are being told that the foundation for wisdom, the bedrock for wisdom, is to fear the Lord. That is the beginning of all wisdom. And what is this fear of the Lord? It is not a cowering, begging type of a fear. But the fear that we are being taught to is the reverential fear of our God, which a lot of people say it is the acknowledgement of the creature to what the Creator has done for them, or the redeemed to what the Redeemer has done for them. It is honoring, it is reverence, it is respect and awe of God as our Father and our Creator. Just one last quote as well from Bruce Wardke from the book of Proverbs. He says, what the alphabet is to reading, and notes to music, to reading music, and numerals to mathematics, the fear of the Lord is to attaining the revealed word of this book. And you'll find the fear of the Lord quoted in many scriptures. Job 28 and verse 28, Psalm 111 verse 10, Proverbs 10 and 9, Ecclesiastes 12 and 13. And the book of Proverbs is part of what they call the wisdom literature that you find in the Bible. Job, Ecclesiastes, Psalms, and Songs of Solomon. So let us turn to the main passage, which is going to address and introduce this series. We find it in chapter 3, verse 1 to 18. We want to discover what is the way of wisdom. And I'll read there. It says, my son, do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments. For length of days and years of life and peace they will add to you. Let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart, so you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and man. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. It will be healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine. My son, do not despise the Lord's wisdom, the Lord's discipline, or be weary of his reproof. For the Lord reproves him whom he loves, as a father the son in whom he delights. Blessed is the one who finds wisdom, and the one who gets understanding. For the gain from her is better than gain from silver, and a profit better than gold. She is more precious than jewels, and nothing you desire can compare with her. Long life is in her right hand. In her left hand are riches and honor. Her ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who lay hold of her. Those who hold her fast are called blessed. So chapter 3 is where we are going to center the way of wisdom. And the way of wisdom really looks at two ways the way of wisdom and the way of the wicked. And it also looks at two women, Lady Wisdom and Lady Folly. So that's what we're going to be looking at this morning. And we will start off by the way of wisdom. And it's from verse 1 to verse 6. It actually says that the way of wisdom, if you remember when we did practicing the way, there was a definition of the way, or it's the same word path, which is the very word in Greek which is called hodos. It is literally a path, right? And the way, we know about the way because a lot of the early believers, early Christians were called the people of the way. They were called the people of the way because they chose to follow the way of Jesus. And Jesus says in John 14 verse 6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me. So the pathway to God is through Jesus. And the disciples and even us as believers, we have chosen the lifestyle of Jesus as his way. So this is the way that we are going to be looking at. It's a pathway. And what is this pathway? There's a pathway of wisdom that is available to us as believers. It is for everyone. And the things that we see there is, number one, it says, in order for us to acknowledge and to know the way of wisdom is, number one, you have to know the commands and the teachings of God. Verse 1 and 2. It says, do not forget the Lord's commands. Do not forget the Lord's words. Do not forget the Lord's law or the Lord's teaching. So right from the onset, for us to embrace the way of wisdom, we need to know the commands and the teachings of God. And the second thing that we are being called to in knowing the way of wisdom is character. Character, not personality, but character. And it talks about, let mercy and truth bind them around your waist. And I can imagine women, when they adorn themselves, they've got these nice necklaces with jewels. And they are precious because they really, that is the same thing that we're being told, that we are to hold faithfulness and love and truth and mercy together. We must cherish them, just like we would do when we put on necklaces. Like my good friend Danny's got a gold necklace sometimes that he brings. That is the sort of thing that as we walk the way of wisdom, we are to cherish, we are to love faithfulness, mercy, and never leave them. We should hold close, and that's verse 3 and verse 4. And most importantly, as we discover and as we journey in the way of wisdom, we are being called to commitment. As verse 5 and says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. And the heart is, 3 times Solomon mentions heart in that passage that we read, 3 times. Why? Because heart is important, and we will learn next week as we look at chapter 4. It says, guard your heart with all diligence, for out of your heart flows all the issues of life. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Out of the heart comes all the evil things, all the bad things. So heart is important. And we're being called not to love God or to love wisdom from a head knowledge, but to love with our being, which is our heart. And he repeats that. So we do that by trusting the Lord with all our hearts. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall make your paths straight. Trust, as one theologian says, Warren Wiersbe, he has written an amazing commentary on Proverbs and even the entire Bible. He says this on trust: to lay helpless face down. It pictures a servant waiting for the master's command in readiness to obey, or a defeated soldier yielding himself to a conquering general. That is the way of wisdom. Trusting God with all our hearts, leaning not on our own understanding. And I'll tell you one thing that I did. I was away for 4 weeks. I went on leave and I was in SA. So I was driving, and normally what happens is if you go to a place, you don't know a place, it's a city or a country that you're visiting, you put on the GPS, right? Global Positioning System. So I used it for the first time, and I was going where I was going, and the next day I said, I don't need the GPS, I know my way. And there I was driving, almost caused an accident. I was supposed to go left, and I went straight, and there was commotion, and I just carried on. That's what happens with us sometimes. We think we know. I've gained knowledge and wisdom, so I don't need the GPS. God, I've been to church. I know how these things work. Just hang on. I've got this. But every single one of us, whether we are the simple or we have wisdom or knowledge, we still need to go back to God so that we can have wisdom. So let's look at the way of the wicked. So we turn to chapter 2, Proverbs chapter 2, verse 12 to 13. It says, wisdom will save you from the ways of the wicked. So we know there's the way of wisdom and there's the way of the wicked. From men whose words are perverse, who have left the straight paths to walk in darkness, who delight in doing wrong and rejoice in the perverseness of evil, whose paths are crooked, who are devious in their ways. So here's the thing that we know about the ways of the wicked. The paths of the wicked is that, number one, their words are perverse. They are unacceptable. They are unreasonable. That's what they speak. And these same guys have left the straight paths. And we know Jeremiah says that do not leave your ancient. Do not forget the ancient paths. Do not leave. But these guys, the ways of the wicked, they leave the straight paths and they choose the crooked paths. They walk in darkness. They choose unrighteousness. Verse 18. And they delight in wrongdoing. They rejoice in wickedness. Haven't you seen people who just love, they rejoice in doing what is wrong? The way of the wickedness, and their paths are crooked. They have devious ways. There's so much that we can see even in the world that Proverbs is trying to help us as we compare. And is contrasting the right way and the wrong way. And is going to contrast the lady wisdom and lady folly. But here's the thing, saints. As we come to know about these two ways, God is saying if there's anyone lacking wisdom, like we said, we raised our hands this morning. He says, if you lack wisdom, ask God who gives generously, liberally. All we need to do is just to go back to Him and ask. And the difference between these two parts is that the other does not trust in the wisdom of God. It does not ask God. It does not seek His ways, nor trust Him. But we are being called to trust in the way of wisdom. The second comparison that we have is lady wisdom. So we go back to chapter 3, verse 18 to 18. And I'm just going to point 4 things that we see about lady wisdom. And Solomon does an amazing job because he takes an image, like he takes a woman as an image of wisdom. And he says, this is what you see in a lady of wisdom. She is more profitable than silver and gold. She is more profitable than worldly wealth and gain. She is more precious than rubies. All that we desire in this world cannot compare to lady wisdom. She gives things that are far above the things that we see in the world. And there's nothing wrong with the things of the world. But it says that she is better than that. All our desires cannot compare with her. But she also gives life. This is the one thing that she gives, not only life, but long life. Riches and honor, pleasant ways, and peace. Verse 16 and 17. And she is the tree of life. She brings blessedness. Just like Psalm chapter 1 says, you are like a tree that is planted by the streams of water, whose leaves never wither, who brings her fruit in season, and whose roots go deeper. She is the tree of life, the same tree of life that we then connect with in the book of Genesis. And then the same tree of life that we shall see when Jesus comes and He brings His kingdom. That tree of life that gives its leaves are the healings to the nation. And then we compare this with lady folly in chapter 2, verse 16 to 19. Verse 16 again says, so you will be delivered. Have you noticed something that is amazing with the way of the wicked and lady folly? Wisdom always saves you or delivers you from the ways of the wicked, or even from the forbidden women or the strange woman or the adulteress. So we need wisdom so that we can know. so that we can make the right choices as we journey on this earth. And it says in verse 16, so wisdom will deliver you from the forbidden woman, from the adulteress with her smooth words, who forsakes the companion of her youth and forgets the covenant of our God. For her house sinks to death, and her paths to the departed. None who go to her come back, nor do they regain the paths of life. So we know she is forbidden. She's a strange woman. She's an adulteress, and she flatters and she deceives. Verse 16. She's unfaithful and unloyal. She's disloyal, unfaithful to the companion of her youth, and disloyal to God's covenant. And when Solomon was writing this, Israel had departed from the ways of God. They had shunned God's principles, and they had gone after other gods. So it is similar to this woman. That is Israel. Even in the world today, people have distanced themselves from the covenants of our God, of the real God, and they've gone after other gods. And most importantly, the house of this lady Foley, and we're going to look at her in the coming weeks, it leads down to death. It leads down to death. And no one who goes to her comes back. Her paths to the dead. And most people who go to her, because wisdom stands in the streets, she's calling. She stands at the corner of the streets, she's calling. She stands at the gate entrance of a city, and she's calling out to the simple, to the wise. But Lady Foley does the same thing as well. May we be a generation that chooses wisdom over folly. And here's the thing, saints. The real application of the ways of wisdom is that the Bible tells us of Solomon, a remarkable man who God had blessed with amazing wisdom. This man gave us an entire book with amazing principles, full of wisdom. This man Solomon, there are 31 chapters in this book, so you can choose a day you can just read Proverbs, and you can gain wisdom. But here's the thing, how Solomon started with wisdom is not how he ended. We know from 1 Kings chapter 11 verse 4 that his heart was taken away by the foreign women that he married. So you can know wisdom, you can know knowledge, you can have a lot of information or knowledge, but yet still you might fail to use it to succeed in the way that God has blessed you with that wisdom. So that's what the reminder that we have. It's a sobering fact to know that with all the wisdom that Solomon had, kings and queens and noble men would visit from far and wide, but yet still, with all that he had, he still missed it at the end. And it could be similar with us as well, even as we live. So when we read the book of Proverbs, you realize that, you know what, like me, I've not been wise. Matter of fact, you and I have been foolish. And we still make foolish choices. But the beautiful thing is that we have Jesus Christ, who took our foolishness and died for our foolishness so that we can receive his wisdom. It is only through Jesus Christ that we can get the real wisdom. Because Colossians 2 says that in Christ is hid all the treasure of wisdom and knowledge. Just picture this. It's like an entire vault that is full of gold. That's the picture that I had about Jesus, Like when you are in Jesus, you have the opportunity to have the hidden treasures of wisdom and knowledge. And Jesus did just that for us. Solomon is the wisest ruler who ever lived. But I'll tell you what, that Jesus Christ is greater than Solomon, because he says this in Matthew 12, verse 42, and says, the Queen of Sheba shall come and ask this generation to be condemned. That, you know what, they celebrated the wisdom and the wealth of Solomon, but a greater than Solomon is here. But they have not chosen to follow him. I pray that we will not be that generation that we sit in the pews, we sit in these chairs, but yet still we did not know a greater than Solomon. And that greater than Solomon is Jesus Christ and all that he did for us on the cross. He is the very word of God, the perfect revelation of God, the perfect example of everything that is God, and he is God. He took your foolishness and my foolishness, And in exchange, he gave us his wisdom. And even today, this morning, he's still saying the same thing to us. Would you choose me over folly? Would you choose me over the ways of the wicked? That is what Jesus said. Proverbs reminds us that, you know what, apart from on our own, we cannot save ourselves. We need someone outside of ourselves. And that person is Jesus. You and I need Jesus. And here's the thing, all principles without Jesus is death. It's just religion, it's just self-righteousness. But really what he's calling us is that we take him in with everything that he has as our Savior. And Solomon would often use the word son, or you can replace son and say daughter. It's like parents who are talking to their sons and daughters. And in order for us to know God the Father, we have to come to him through his Son, Jesus Christ. Because the wisdom that he's got is not for the wicked, but it is for his children. So if we are called his children, we have to know him. Not just head knowledge, but to know him as Father. That's what he's calling us. That's what he's exhorting us. We can keep the principles, but if we miss knowing God and God knowing us, then we would have missed it. Jeremiah reminds us in chapter 9, verse 23-24, as I conclude, it says, let not those that are strong boast or glory in their strength, or those that are full of riches glory in their riches, or the wise glory in their wisdom. But let them glory in this thing, that I, the Lord, practice steadfast love, justice, and righteousness in the earth. In these things I delight. We should not delight in the wisdom of this world, nor the intellect of men, but we should delight in knowing that we know God and God knows us. And James says actually in chapter 3 when he talks about wisdom, that the wisdom of this world, it's earthly, it's selfish, it is demonic. But the wisdom from above is first pure, gentle, peaceable, easily entreated. And that wisdom that came from heaven is Jesus Christ himself. And he wants us to walk this life in the ways of wisdom so that we know what it takes to make the right choices. So as I end this morning, I want to end with this. We are being asked not just to make a living, but to make a life. Don't just make a living. Make a life. And the first essential for an effective study of the book of Proverbs or any other book of the Bible is faith in Jesus Christ. So that you can honestly call God your Father. That is the most important thing that we need. You can't make a life until you first have life. And this life comes through faith in Jesus. John 3 verse 16. Shall we stand? I want to give someone an opportunity who says, look here, I've heard you. I want to stop just living. I want to make a life. That life can only be found in Jesus Christ. Because he has declared himself that I am the way, the truth, and the life. And no one can come to the Father except by me. The path to God is through Jesus. We need to take the lifestyle of Jesus, his character and everything of his teachings, and be called his. The day is coming, saints, when he's going to count who is his, where he's going to separate the sheep from the goat. There's a choice that we need to make. We can either choose the way of wisdom or we can choose the way of the wicked. But I encourage you this morning to choose the way of wisdom. And that way of wisdom is Jesus Christ.